Good evening. Welcome to the day 10 of Reading Challenge. Chapter 15. At the end of the evening, Kitty told her mother of her conversation with Levin, and in spite of all the pity she felt for Levin, she was glad at the thought that she had received an offer. She had no doubt that she had acted rightly, but after she had gone to bed for a long while, she could not sleep. One impression pursued her relentlessly. It was Levin's face, with his scowling brows, and his kind eyes looking out in dark dejection below them. As he stood listening to her father and glancing at her at Vronsky, she felt so sorry for him that tears came into her eyes. But immediately she thought of the man for whom she had given him up. She vividly recalled his manly, resolute face, his noble self possession, and the good nature conspicuous in everything towards everyone. She remembered the love for her of the man she loved, and once more all was gladness in her soul, and she lay on the pillow, smiling with a happiness. I am sorry, I am sorry. But what could I do? It's not my fault, she said to herself. But an inner voice told her something else, whether she felt remorse at having won Levin's love or at having refused him. She did not know, but her happiness was poisoned by doubts. Lord, have pity on us. Lord, have pity on us. Lord, have pity on us. She repeated to herself till she fell asleep. Meanwhile, there took place below, in the prince's little library, one of the scenes so often repeated between the parents on account of their favorite daughter. What? I will tell you what, shouted the prince, waving his arm and at once wrapping his squirrel-lined dressing gown round him again. That you have no pride, no dignity, that you are disgracing, ruining your daughter by this vulgar, stupid matchmaking. But really, for mercy's sake, prince, what have I done? Said the princess, almost crying. She, pleased and happy after her conversation with her daughter, had gone to the prince to say good night as usual. And though she had no intention of telling him of Levin's offer and Kitty's refusal, still, she hinted to her husband that she fancied things were practically settled with Vronsky, and that he would declare himself so soon as his mother arrived. And thereupon, at those words, the prince had all at once flown into a passion and begun to use unseemly language. What have you done? I'll tell you what. First of all, you are trying to catch an eligible gentleman, and all Moscow will be talking of it, and with good reason. If you have evening parties, invite everyone. Don't pick out the possible suitors. Invite all the young bucks. Engage a piano player and let them dance, and not as you do things nowadays, hunting up good matches. It makes me sick to see it, and you have gone on till you have turned the poor wench bad. Levin's Levin is a thousand times the better man. As for this little Petersburg swell, they're turned out by machinery, all on one pattern, and all precious rubbish. But if he were a prince of the blood, my daughter need not run after anyone. But what have I done? Why, you have. The prince was crying wrathfully. I know, if one were to listen to you, interrupted the princess, we should never marry our daughter. If it's to be so, we would better go into the country. Well, and we had better? But do wait a minute. Do I try and catch them? I don't try to catch them in the least. A young man and a very nice one has fallen in love with her. And she, I fancy. Oh, yes, you fancy. And how if she really is in love and he's no more thinking of marriage than I am? Oh, that I should live to see it. Ah, spiritualism. Ah, nice. Ah, the bard. And the prince, imagining that he was mimicking his wife, made a mincing curtsy at each word. And this is how we are preparing wretchedness for Kitty, and she's really got the notion into her head. But what makes you suppose so? I don't suppose. I know. We have eyes for such things. Though women folk haven't. I see a man who has serious intentions. That's Levin. And I see a peacock like this featherhead who's only amusing himself. Oh well, when once you get an idea into your head, well, you will remember my words, but too late, just as with Dolly. Well, we don't talk of it. The princess stopped him, recollecting her unlucky dolly. By all means, and good night, and signing each other with a cross, the husband and wife parted with a kiss, feeling that they each remained of their own opinion. The princess had at first been quite certain that Ivany had settled Kitty's future, and that there could be no doubt of Vronsky's intentions. But her husband's words had disturbed her, and returning to her own room in terror before the unknown future, she too, like Kitty, repeated several times in her heart, "Lord, have pity! Lord, have pity! Lord, have pity!" Chapter 60. Vronsky had never had a real home life. His mother had been in her youth a brilliant society woman, who had had during her married life, and still more afterwards, many love affairs notorious in the whole fashionable world. His father he scarcely remembered, and he had been educated in the corps of pages. Leaving the school very young as a brilliant officer, he had at once got into the circle of wealthy Petersburg army men. Although he did go more or less into Petersburg society, his love affairs had always hit her to being outside it. In Moscow, he had for the first time felt, after his luxurious and coarse life at Petersburg, all the charm of intimacy with a sweet and innocent girl of his own rank who cared for him. It never even entered his head that there could be any harm in his relations with Kitty. At the balls, he danced principally with her. He was a constant visitor at their house. He talked to her as people commonly do talk in society, all sort of nonsense, but nonsense to which he could not help attaching a special meaning in her case. Although he said nothing to her that he could not have said before everybody, he felt that she was becoming more and more dependent upon him, and the more he felt this, the better he liked it, and the tenderer was his feeling for her. He did not know that his mode of behavior in relation to Kitty had a definite character, that it is courting young girls with no intentions of marriage, and that such courting is one of the evil action common among brilliant young men such as he was. It seemed to him that he was the first who had discovered this pleasure, and he was enjoying his discovery. If he could have heard what her parents were saying that evening, if he could have put himself at the point on view of the family and have heard that Kitty would be unhappy if he did not marry her, he would have been greatly astonished and would not have believed it. He could not believe that what gave such great and delicate pleasure to him, and above all to her, could be wrong. Still less could he have believed that he ought to marry. Marriage had never presented itself to him as a possibility. He not only disliked family life, but a family, and especially a husband, was in accordance with the views generally in the bachelor world in which he lived, conceived as something alien, repellent, and above all ridiculous. But though Vronsky had not the least suspicion what the parents were saying, he felt on coming away from the Saksharbarkis that the secret spiritual bond which existed between him and Kitty had grown so much stronger that even in that some step must be taken. But what step could and ought to be taken he could not imagine. What is so exquisite? He thought, as he returned from the Shakcharbas case, carrying away with him, as he always did, a delicious feeling of purity and freshness, arising partly from the fact that he had not been smoking for a whole evening, and with it a new feeling of tenderness at her love for him. What is so exquisite is that not a word has been said by me or by her, but we understand each other so well in this unseen language of looks and tones that this evening, more clearly than ever, she told me she loves me, and how secretly, simply, and most of all, how trustfully. I feel myself better, purer. I feel that I have a heart and that there is a great deal of good in me. Those sweet, loving eyes, when she said, "Indeed, I do." Well, what then? Oh, nothing. It's good for me and good for her. And he began wondering where to finish the evening. He passed in review of the places he might go to. Club? A game of Bessie. Champagne with the Ignatov. No, I'm not going. Chateau des Flores. There I shall find Oblonsky songs the cancan. No, I'm sick of it. That's why I like the Schutzerberg case. That I'm growing better. I'll go home. I'll go home. He went straight to his room at the Deserts Hotel, ordered supper, and then undressed. And as soon as his head touched the pillow, fell into sound sleep. Chapter 17. Next day, at 11 o'clock in the morning, Vronsky drove to the station of the Petersburg Railway to meet his mother. And the first person he came across on the great flight of steps was Oblonsky, who was expecting his sister by the same train. "Oh, Your Excellency!" cried Oblonsky. "Whom are you meeting?" "My mother," Vronsky responded, smiling as everyone did who met Oblonsky. He shook hands with him, and together they ascended the steps. "She used to be here from Petersburg today. I was looking out for you till 2 o'clock last night. Where did you go after the Shcherbeskis?" "Home," answered Vronsky. "I must own I felt so well content yesterday after the Shcherbetskis that I didn't care go anywhere." "I know a gallant steed by token sure, and by his eyes I know a youth in love," declaimed Stephen Arkadyevich, just as he had done before to Levin. Vronsky smiled with a look that seemed to say that he did not deny it, but he promptly changed the subject. "And whom are you meeting?" he asked. "I have come to meet a pretty woman," said Oblonsky. "You don't say so." "Honey said you, my sister Anna." "Oh, that's Madame Karenina," said Vronsky. "You know her?" "No doubt." "I think I do. Or perhaps not. I really am not sure," Vronsky answered heedlessly, with a vague recollection of something stiff and tedious evoked by the name Karenina. "But Alexei Alexandrovich, my celebrated brother-in-law, you surely must know. All the world knows him. I know him by reputation and by sight. I know that he is clever, learned, religious somewhat. But you know that's not in my line," said Vronsky in English. "Yeah, yes, he's very, yes, he is a very remarkable man, rather a conservative but a splendid man," observed Stephen Arkadyevich, "a splendid man." "Oh, well, so much the better for him," said Vronsky, smiling. "Oh, you're come," he said, addressing a tall old footman of his mother's, standing at the door. "Come here." Besides the charm Oblonsky had in general for everyone, Vronsky had felt of late especially drawn to him by the fact that in his imagination he was associated with Kitty. "Well, what do you say? Shall we give a supper on Sunday for the Deva?" he said to him with a smile, taking his arm. "Of course, I am collecting subscriptions." "Oh, did you make the acquaintance of my friend Levin?" asked Stephen Arkadyevich. "Yes, but he left rather early." "He's a capital fellow," pursued Oblonsky, "isn't he?" "I don't know why it is," responded Vronsky. "In all Moscow people, present company of course accepted," he put in jestingly. "There's something uncompromising. They're all on the defensive, lose their tempers as though they all want to make one feel something." "Yes, that's true. It is so," said Stephen Arkadyevich, laughing good humoredly. "Will the train soon be in?" Vronsky asked a railway official. "The train signaled," answered the man. The approach of the train was more and more evident by the preparatory bustle in the station, the rush of porters, the movement of policemen and attendants, and people meeting the train. Though through the frosty vapor could be seen workmen in short sheepskins and soft felt boots crossing the rails of the curving line. The hiss of the boiler could be heard on the distant rails, and the rumble of something heavy. "No," said Stephen Arkadyevich, who felt a great inclination to tell Vronsky of Levin's intentions in regard to Kitty. "No, you have not got a true impression of Levin. He's a very nervous man and is sometimes out of humor. It's true, but then he is often very nice. He's such a true, honest nature and a heart of gold. But yesterday there were special reasons," pursued Stephen Arkadyevich with a meaning smile, totally obvious of the genuine sympathy he had felt the day before his friend, and feeling the same sympathy now, only for Vronsky. "Yes, there are reasons why he could not help being either particularly happy or particularly unhappy." Vronsky stood still and asked directly, "How so? Do you mean he made your Belisor an offer yesterday?" "Maybe," said Stephen Arkadyevich. "I fancied something of the sort yesterday. Yes, if he went away early and was out of humor too, it must mean it. He's been so long in love, and I'm very sorry for him. So that's it, I should imagine. Though she might reckon on a better match, said Vronsky, drawing himself up and walking about again, though I don't know him, of course, he added. Yes, that is a hateful position. That's why most fellows prefer to have to do with the Claras. If you don't succeed with them, it only proves that you have not enough cash. But in this case, one's dignity is at stake. But here's the train. The engine had already whistled in the distance. A few instants later, the platform was queering, and with puffs of steam hanging low in the air from the frost, the engine rolled up. With the lever of the middle wheel rhythmically moving up and down, and the stooping figure of the engine driver covered this with frost. Behind the tender, setting the platform more and more slowly swaying, came the luggage van with the dog whining in it. At last, the passenger carriages rolled in, oscillating before coming to a standstill. A smart guard jumped out, giving a whistle, and after him, one by one, the impatient passengers began to get out. An officer of the guards, holding himself erect and looking severely about him, a nimble little merchant with a satchel, smiling gaily, a peasant with a sack over his shoulder. Vronsky, standing beside Oblonsky, watched the carriages and the passengers, totally oblivious of his mother. What he had just heard about Kitty excited and delighted him. Unconsciously, he arched his chest, and his eyes flashed. He felt himself a conqueror. Countess Vronskaya is in that compartment, said the smart guard, going up to Vronsky. The god's words roused him and forced him to think of his mother and his approaching meeting with her. He did not in his heart respect his mother, and without acknowledging it to himself, he did not love her, though in accordance with the ideas of the set in which he lived. And with his own education, he could not have conceived of any behavior to his mother not in the highest degree respectful and obedient. And the more externally obedient and respectful his behavior, the less in his heart he respected and loved her. Chapter 18. Vronsky followed the guard to the carriage, and at the door of the compartment he stopped short to make room for a lady who was getting out. With the insight of a man of the world, from one glance at this lady's appearance, Vronsky classified her as belonging to the best society. He begged pardon and was getting into the carriage, but felt he must glance at her once more. Not that she was very beautiful, not on account of the elegance and modest grace which were apparent in her whole figure, but because in the expression of her charming face, as she passed close by him, there was something peculiarly caressing and soft. As he looked round, she too turned her head. Her shining grey eyes, that looked dark from the thick lashes, rested with a friendly attention on his face, as though she were recognizing him, and then promptly turned away to the passing crowd, as though seeking someone. In that brief look, Vronsky had time to notice the suppressed eagerness which played over her face, and flitted between the brilliant eyes and the faint smile that curved her red lips. It was as though her nature were so brimming over with something that against her will it showed itself now in the flash of her eyes, and now in her smile. Deliberately, she shrouded the light in her eyes, but it shone against her will in the faintly perceptible smile. Vronsky stepped into the carriage. His mother, a dried up old lady with black eyes and ringlets, screwed up her eyes, scanning her son, and smiled slightly with her thin lips. Getting up from the seat and handing her maid a bag, she gave her little wrinkled hand to her son to kiss, and lifting his head from her hand, kissed him on the cheek. "You got my telegram? Quite well, thank God. You had a good journey?" said her son, sitting down beside her and involuntarily listening to a woman's voice outside the door. He knew it was the voice of the lady he had met at the door. "All the same, I don't agree with you," said the lady's voice. "It's a Petersburg's view, madam, not Petersburg, but simply feminine," she responded. "Well, well, allow me to kiss your hand. Goodbye, Ivan Petrovich. And could you see if my brother is here, and send him to me?" said the lady in the doorway, and stepped back again into the compartment. Well, have you found your brother? Said Countess Vronsky, addressing the lady. Vronsky understood now that this was Madame Karenina. Your brother is here, he said, standing up. Excuse me, I did not know you. And indeed, our acquaintance was so slight, said Vronsky, bowing, that no doubt you do not remember me. Oh no, said she. I should have known you because your mother and I have been talking. I think of nothing but you all the way. As she spoke, she let the eagerness that would insist on coming out show itself in her smile, and still no sign of my brother. Do call him Alexei, said the old countess. Vronsky stepped out onto the platform and shouted, Oblonsky, here. Madame Karenina, however, did not wait for her brother, but catching sight of him, she stepped out with her light, resolute step. And as soon as her brother had reached her, with a gesture that struck Vronsky by its decision and its grace, she flung her left arm around his neck, drew him rapidly to her, and kissed him warmly. Vronsky gazed, never taking his eyes from her, and smiled. He could not have said why, but recollecting that his mother was waiting for him, he went back again into the carriage. She's very sweet, isn't he? Isn't she? Said the Countess of Madame Karenina. Her husband put her with smile. Her husband put her with me, and I was delighted to have her. We have been talking all the way, and so you, I hear, was fails. I don't know what you are referring to, Maman. He answered coldly. Come, Maman, let us go. Madame Karenina entered the carriage again to say goodbye to the Countess. Well, Countess, you have met your son, and I, my brother said, brother, she said. Well, Countess, you have met your son, and I, my brother, she said, and all my gossip is exhausted. I should have nothing more to tell you. Oh no, said the Countess, taking her hand. I could go all round the world with you and never be dull. You are one of those delightful women in whose company it's sweet to be silent as well as to talk. Now please don't fret over your son. You can't expect never to be parted. Madame Karenina stood quite still, holding herself very erect, and her eyes were smiling. Anna Arkadevna, the countess said in explanation to her son, has a little son, 8-year-old, I believe, and she has never been parted from him before, and she keeps fretting over leaving him. Yes, the countess and I have been talking all the time. I of my son, and she of hers. She of hers, said Madame Karenina, and again a smile lighted up her face, and caressing smile intended for him. I am afraid that you must have been dreadfully bored, he said, promptly catching the ball of coquetry she had flung him. But apparently she did not care to pursue the conversation in the street, and she turned to the old countess. Thank you so much. The time has passed so quickly. Goodbye, countess. Goodbye, my love, answered the countess. Let me have a kiss of your pretty face. I speak plainly at my age, and I tell you simply that I have lost my heart to you. Stereotyped as the phrase was, Madame Karenina obviously believed it and was delighted by it. She flushed, bent down slightly, and put her cheek to the countess' lips, drew herself up again, and with the same smile fluttering between her lips and her eyes, she gave her hand to Vronsky. He pressed the little hand she gave him, and was delighted as though at something special by the energetic squeeze with which she freely and vigorously shook his hand. She went out with a rapid step which bore her rather fully developed figure with such strange lightness. Very charming, said the countess. That was just what her son was thinking. His eyes followed her till her graceful figure was out of sight, and then the smile remained on his face. He saw out of the window how she went up to her brother, put her arm in his, and began telling him something eagerly, obviously something that had nothing to do with him. Vronsky, and at that he felt annoyed. Well, Maman, are you perfectly well? He repeated, turning to his mother. Everything has been delightful. Alexandra has been very good, and Mary has grown very pretty. She is very interesting. And she began telling him again of what interested her most, the christening of her grandson, for which she had been staying in Petersburg, and the special favor shown her elder son by the Tsar. Here's Lavrenti, said Vronsky, looking out of the window. Now we can go, if you like. The old butler who had travelled with the countess came to the carriage to announce that everything was ready and the countess got up to go. Come, there's not such a crowd now, said Vronsky. The maid took a handbag and the laptop, but the butler and a porter the other baggage. Vronsky gave his mother his arm, but just as they were getting out of the carriage, several men ran suddenly by with panic-stricken faces. The station master, too, ran by his extraordinary colored cap. Obviously, something unusual had happened. The crowd who had left the train were running back again. What, where? Flung himself crushed, was heard among the crowd. Stephen Arkadevich, with his sister on his arm, turned back. They, they too looked scared and stopped at the carriage door to avoid the crowd. The ladies got in, while Vronsky and Stephen Arkadevich followed the crowd to find out the details of the disaster. A god, either drunk or too much muffled up in the bitter frost, had not heard the train moving back and had been crushed. Before Vronsky and Oblonsky came back, the ladies heard the fact about from the butler. Oblonsky and Vronsky had both seen the mutilated corpse. Oblonsky was evidently upset. He frowned and seemed ready to cry. Oh, how awful! Oh, Anna, if you had seen it! Oh, how awful! He said. Vronsky did not speak. His handsome face was serious but perfectly composed. Oh, if you had seen it, Countess, said Stephen Arkadovich, and his wife was there. It was awful to see her. She flung herself on the body. They say he was the only support of an immense family. How awful! Couldn't one do anything of her? Couldn't one do anything for her? Said Madame Karenina in an agitated whisper. Vronsky glanced at her and immediately got out the carriage. I'll be back directly, Maman, he remarked, turning round in the doorway. When he came back a few minutes later, Stephen Arkadevich was already in conversation with the Countess about the new singer, while the Countess was impatiently looking towards the door, waiting for her son. Now let us be off, said Vronsky, coming in. They went, they went out together. Vronsky was in front of with his mother. Behind walked Madame Karenina with her brother. Just as they were going out of the station master overtook Vronsky. You gave my assistant 200 rupees. Would you kindly explain for whose benefit you intended them? For the widow, said Vronsky, shrugging his shoulders. I should have thought there was no need to ask. You gave that, cried Oblonsky. Behind and pressing his sister's hand, he added, very nice, very nice. Isn't he a splendid fellow? Goodbye, Countess. And he and his sister stood still, looking for her maid. When they went out, the Vronsky carriage had already driven away. People coming in were still talking of what happened. What a horrible death, said a gentleman passing by. They say he was cut into two pieces. On the contrary, I think it's the easiest instantaneous, observed another. How is it they don't take proper precautions, said a third. Madame Karenina seated herself in the carriage, and Stephen Arkadovich saw with surprise that her lips were quivering, and she was with difficulty restraining her tears. What is it, Anna? He asked. When they had driven a few hundred yards, it's an omen of evil, she said. What nonsense, said Stephen Arkadovich. You have come. That's the chief thing. You can't conceive how I am resting my hopes on you. Have you known Vronsky long? She asked. Yes. You know we are hoping he will marry Kitty. Yes, said Anna softly. Come now, let us talk of you, she added, tossing her head as though she would physically shake off something superfluous opposing her. Let us talk of your affairs. I got your letter, and here I am. Yes, all my hopes are in you, said Stephen Arkadovich. Well, tell me all about it. And Stephen Arkadovich began to tell his story. On reaching home, Oblonsky helped his sister out, sighed, pressed her hand, and set off to his office. Thanks for the day. We'll see tomorrow.